thank you for attending the worst timed presentation in RSA Wednesday morning at 8:30 a.m. I appreciate your rigor, and as you can maybe tell, I am actually losing my voice, so hopefully you can hear me go as I go through this. Thank you for attending my presentation. Today we're going to talk about rebooting America's identity system and AI as the catalyst. To give you a little bit of context, this presentation and this topic specifically, oddly enough, is something at which I don't normally talk about, but has always been a small passion of mine and a level of frustration that I've run into as both a CISO and someone in the security industry for quite some time. And so I thought I would really go through the thought process and then give a great presentation about this. So let's get started. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to imagine a world where passwords and you proving your identity just doesn't exist, never has to be done. A place where you can go into your banking account, go to a doctor or get a new doctor without ever pulling out an ID, without logging into a website. A place where fraud is low or minimal if existent at all. A place where you can just go anywhere and then never have to be proven what your identity is, where you never have to get your driver's license renewed or your passport renewed or ever have to stand in line at a DMV. All of these things are non-existent. That is an amazing world. If you think about all of the places where your identity is required and the amount of things that is required, when that goes away, the enablement and the freedom that comes with that is pretty crazy. But unfortunately, that is not the world that we live in. We live in this reality. And in this reality, what you have in order to prove your identity is you need password managers, you need SMS, you need 2FA, you need MFA, you need forgot passwords, you need photos of your driver's license, photos of the back of your driver's license, photos of your face with a driver's license with you turning and rotating your head. You need little boxes at which you have to put in numbers and move and solve puzzles. You need to be able to have your mother's maiden name. You need your date of birth. You need your social security number. You need all of these things, multi-factors, all of this stuff. And in fact, you need be able to take a photo of your driver's license with today's newspaper, with your mother standing behind you in order to prove your identity. This is the reality that we've got, and it is absolutely terrible and dismal. And in fact, I think that the peak of this for me, I have a story, is we do all of this in order to prove our identity. And I remember there's one time where my wife was sick, and so we were trying to get her and pick up the meds, and unfortunately there was like an off typo in our health insurance, and so we couldn't pick up the meds. And so I was on the phone with the insurance company, and I am the holder of the insurance, going through all of the same steps we know how to do to prove identity. And then we get to the point where I was like, hey, we need to change my wife's typo in her name so that we can fix this so we can pick up the meds. And the person, the representative on the phone is like, okay, well, I can't do that without her authorization. And I'm like, well, but I am the primary holder. Like, why do you need her authorization? She's asleep and she's sick. Like, what is that going to do? And I'm like, well, it doesn't matter, sir. I need her authorization. And so I have to go wake her up, hand her the phone, and they say, do you authorize this action? And she's like, yeah, I authorize it. Hands the phone back to me, okay, sir, and then changes the thing. This is the level of identity that we get to, is handing a phone to someone so they can say yes in order for them to be authorized. It's absolutely pathetic because of all of this stuff that we have to do in order to prove just who we are. And it's a big problem. And in fact, it is a massive problem, a $43 billion a year problem. So when you look at all of these companies that are on there, they're all about either proving who you are in identity or authorizing what you do in identity. This is a massive, massive market, all built to this insane amount of complexity that we all, as you know, as both a consumer on your personal side and as an employee on your corporate side have to manage and deal with. But if this is a big problem, what's even bigger is that this is the small side of the problem. And in fact, this is a $1 trillion problem if you really expand the scope of what's going on in identity. And what do I mean by that? If you truly solve the identity problem properly, it becomes a massive savings, efficiency. Think of all the paperwork that you've got to fill out, all of the processes that you deal with when you try to prove your identity and what you do, when you open up a bank account, when you get a loan, when you go to a new doctor. All of these efficiencies all of a sudden get saved. The time increases the amount of savings tremendously. The potential, think about if the government were able to centralize identity properly, the amount of efficiency that you would get where you have true proven identity in a central trusted source, and how you can verify that with digital signatures, with the ability to automatically understand where you are, where you're from, where your residence without having that information. That unlocks a huge amount of potential for both corporate companies, consumer applications to make things faster, quicker, allow growth and ability to grow much faster. And then if you go down to even the negative side, which is the losses and the fraud that occurs. When you look at the annual number of fraud that the US government deals with from an identity loss perspective, it's in the 200 to 500 billion every year on fraud because of our identity. When you look at the pandemic and all of the fraud that occurred for the money that was flowing out, that is estimated at over $100 billion in losses in fraud. And then the slide I showed you before, which was only the consumer identity loss of $43 billion. This is the level of scope at which really identity affects us and everybody else. And I was massively surprised as I researched into this stuff that the scope of where this thing goes. So why can't we solve this problem? If there's so much ability to be, and there's so much momentum and potential to be able to make money, save money, why can't we solve it? It's because we have a broken foundation. And my favorite, of course, is the XKCD, which I modified slightly on here to show that the SSN and birth certificate is the foundation of what we consider to be identity, and everything is duct taped on top of it. That is why we have MFA, 2FA, SMS, factors, passwords, logins, is because we have no true way of understanding who you are. And this is that broken foundation, and this is where we started. So let me give you a couple small history lessons on Social Security and birth certificates. The Social Security card actually was initially created in order for you to be able to collect Social Security off of whatever income that you happen to make. And when it first started, actually people were proud when they first issued these out. That means you had a job. That means you made money. And people actually wore them publicly. They had tattoos of their Social Security number. They wrote them on their t-shirts. Like, you can go back in time and look where people were proud to have a Social Security number because it showed wealth. It showed that you had a job. It showed that you were well-to-do. And in fact, for 25 years, the Social Security card had a stamp on the back of it that said, "Not for your identification use." Clearly stamped on the back of this card. This was not used for identification. It was never meant to be used for identification. It was only a number at which the Social Security Administration could understand where you are and your wages that you had to make sure that they could take the right amount of money. Birth certificates. Birth certificates were never used as identification either. In fact, they were originally used just to log the event of a birth. And in fact was mostly used for census reasons, to understand how many people were born in a region, and that is where the birth certificate started. And in fact, every state, even today, manages and creates their own version of a birth certificate. So many of you who have birth certificates, they're all different depending on states that you go. So you'd like to think, well, shouldn't birth certificates be like currency? Very anti-counterfeit, very fancy, standardized? Not at all. From years to years to years, you have a legacy problem. 50 years ago, a birth certificate was on a printed piece of paper in the state of Nebraska, or maybe something that was a little bit better in the state of Georgia, but every year they try to improve it, and every state does it differently. So you have literally thousands and thousands of different variations, times, some with good anti-counterfeiting, some with no anti-counterfeiting on birth certificates that are all both valid and have to be valid for this legacy problem. And where did birth certificates really get pushed? Birth certificates weren't even mandatory. The only time they became mandatory in our country was because of labor laws. There was a big labor law push that said kids should not work at a certain age. And then they said, well, we're going to pass this, and in order for us to verify this, you need some sort of thing that says how old you are. And so they started enforcing you having a birth certificate. So people used to have to go to work, and they would have people that would check in. You have to show your birth certificate so that you're not underage in order to go into labor. And that is where birth certificates really started becoming forced or mandated onto people. Again, never used for identification at all. But yet these two documents have become the core root of everything that we do and all of the things that you see on top of what we do. So this approach, as we can already tell today, fails in our world in an analog world, but we are clearly not only in a digital world today, but moving in even more into a digital world. So it fails today, it will fail in digital. How do we do something better? Now, this can work. You think, well, hey, this is just not something that you can fix. But there are examples of where people do have digital identifications. They've moved from analog into digital IDs, countries that have done way better. So I'm going to give you examples here of 3 of them, among many that have done way better than the way the US has done. Singapore is a great example, where Singapore has unified access using a single digital identification for their citizens, allowing over access to 2,000 services and 700 plus organizations. And the efficiency and documentation and processes they saved by moving into the system, they have estimated saves over 2% of their GDP annually. That's massive in terms of savings. You can go in Singapore, you never have to access or stand in line or go to an office. You can just do it online. Quick, boom, 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 open all the time. Their identity core and how they've done things, they basically, how many of you have gone through and said, oh, I need to fill out social security number, birth date, name on a form at a doctor's office, gone to the doctor's office a month later, had to refill out that form, gone to your dentist, refill that form, and then go to your government, refill that form. They had just said, we created Tell Us Once. Because we have your identity, all of those people now can just get that identity from us. And then we will verify it. You never have to do it again. Once you do it once, no longer does that happen. Everywhere you go, they just verify it with the Singapore government services, done. You never have to do a thing. This is the kind of efficiency and ease of use that can be had. Here's another one that you'd never think, Estonia. Who would have ever thought Estonia? People think Estonia, isn't that some backworld third world country? No, Estonia is actually probably number 1 in the way that they've moved their citizens into digital identity. 99% of their public services are all online, accessible 24/7. You can instantaneously log on, do anything related to your government online. They allow, because of this, and they're single-fied identify, legally binding digital signatures are standardized. That means no longer do you sign on pieces of paper with your hand. It's all done through their DocuSign-like system. They've also created a framework where they said, you know what we want? We want privacy, but we also want the seamless capability. So they created this thing called X-Road, which basically says every single area has their database and their services, which you can own and manage. And then we have a seamless protocol that we all agreed on that we can communicate. And it acts similar to like P2P systems. And then what you can do is you can now communicate with other countries. So like, for example, gosh, I'm blanking on the name of a couple countries, but there's a couple countries now that are connected to Estonia's, and they're using so now they can do cross-country single identification. So now country A and Estonia can now verify Estonia IDs instantaneously, all using their protocol. This is all happening today. So many of you think, well, that's Singapore, that's Estonia. They're actually pretty small countries, not a lot of citizens. I don't believe you could ever apply something like that in the US. We're too big, too much legacy, and it's just not viable to accomplish. And with that, I answer for you India. India did 1.3 billion biometric identifications. They revamped their entire identity system for their citizens, and they did that in a little less than 10 years. And when you think about India and the scale from both the poorest to the wealthiest, they were able to get those IDs to them. And what's amazing is what happened is billions of dollars in fraud vanished as they started implementing this system. And it also created a lot of economic opportunity for India, because then there are people who were poor, who never had their identities at all, now had an identity and could open a bank account instantly if they needed one. That allows now these people who never had the capability, they are now in the system, in the network, having the ability to go and use these things. And so you can see a lot of benefit that then gets created because of these unified identities. So this can be done, and it can work. And we're seeing these countries all around us starting to say, we know that identity is critical, and moving into the digital future, we have to be there, and we've got to be able to take advantage of it and reap the benefits that we can see by doing this. However, when you look at us, you're like, but this is a massive problem. Like, it's so gargantuan, like there's just no way we're ever going to go down that road. And in fact, it's so difficult that this will just never change unless it's forced to. And naturally, what I would think is the only time for us as a country to probably ever change this is through some sort of massive crisis that would occur that forces something like this to occur. Or I would also like to part in my presentation, maybe another forcing function for this could be Gen AI as we see it today. And when I say that, let's look at what's happening today in AI and in technology. We already know about deep fakes and about the proliferation that we're starting to see happen. We're starting to understand that, say, well, if deep fakes not just understand who is real, it's getting to the point where anything can be created synthetically. My voice, your voice can easily be created. Then it was your photos could be easily be created and it looks like you, but it's not you. Now you're seeing video that looks like you, but is not like you. And now you're seeing live, real-time Zoom video conferences that looks like you, but is not like you. The things that you write and the things that you produce and the content that gets written looks like yours, but is not yours. All of these things are starting to come out as content or aspects, but you don't know who it truly is. When you're messaging someone in your company, or when you're emailing someone that you're talking to, or even if you're on a Hangout call or a Zoom call with somebody, how do you truly know the person you're talking to is the person you're talking to? And by the way, that's just today, and you guys have seen the momentum of this. Just think 5 more years from now. It's going to be imperceptible in terms of who is real, what is real. And then when you start thinking about agents, so many of you have been hearing, obviously all over the place, around AI agents, automation, these things that act on behalf of you. So how does that work? Well, let's say I'm at work and I'm a software engineer. One of the things that I'm going to have is I'm going to have an AI agent. That AI agent is going to take and help me write code. It's going to help me debug code. It's going to check in code for me. It's going to be doing all of these things on my behalf. It's going to be modifying and accessing my ticketing system. It's going to be sending Slacks to my employees to ask them for things or to verify things as it is coding and building the software. It is not me. It is agents acting on behalf of me. If you think about you in your personal life, these are agents that are going to do shopping for you. They're going to automatically order off of Instacart or off of DoorDash, or call the restaurant to make reservations for you. These are agents that are going to be acting and doing things, attending and creating hobbies, which sounds amazing, which by the way, it is amazing. But then how do we now know who you are acting on behalf of? How do I know when you send me a message, or I'm at a restaurant, or someone orders or delivers, that it really is truly authorized by the individual to do this? We have no thought or concept as to how we're going to handle this kind of authorization. And it's coming way faster than we can possibly imagine, right? This is moving into enterprises and companies as we speak. And then when you think in 5 years, you're like, if all of this goes, this becomes a bigger and bigger problem. So then when you look at this, You say, what you need is you need authenticity. How do I know that what is written is real and truly created by you? How do I know the action that is being taken is authorized by you or a company or a system? These are all coming down to a foundation of, in order to do that, you must have identity. That is the key pillar in order to make this happen. So, this caused me to step back and say, how do you rethink identity? And so what I'm going to have you guys do is, most of this presentation is having you take the journey along with me as I was looking at all of this stuff and thinking, how do you redo this? Like if you were to erase everything we know about identity and you wanted to recreate it from scratch with first principles thinking, what does that look like? And so I'm going to walk you through the process that I literally went through as I started going down my research phase of how to think about identity. And I hope that it gives you some perspective around this. So the first thing that you do is, well, what is identity truly? And what it is all it is at its core is proof of uniqueness, right? When you really look at what is identity, it's what is it that makes you as a person unique. And so I'm going to create this identity stack. And in this stack, the base foundation is proof of person. You must have something that is unique. And of course, all of us immediately think of some of the factors that I listed below in this stack. Oh, this is now your DNA. This is now your fingerprint. This is now, like, there are ways of doing your face. There's also ways of identifying you the way you walk. There are ways of identifying you the way that you type. There are your eyeballs, the way you do hands. All of these things are unique methods that really are supposed to be uniquely identifying you. But when you start looking at these, you start measuring. You start saying, well, wait a minute. Like, let's take, for example, something like typing. Typing is unique to a certain degree, but then you start thinking, well, but typing, it's very hard. Like, you don't want to just type things in order to identify yourself. That's just really a weird way of doing things. And number two, like, it's not very reliable, because if I'm eating food with one hand and typing with the other, then clearly that's very, very off, and that's not a great way of identifying me. And when you think about voice, oh, well, voice is a great way to identify somebody. But then you look at me today. My voice is clearly different than what I normally sound like, because I'm raspy and I'm losing my voice. When you're sick, your voice changes and the way the tones change. So all of a sudden, that's not very reliable as a voice. So then you start thinking, wait, there are factors you have to consider when you think about not just what makes someone unique, but there are other factors of what makes someone reliably unique. And so then what you start doing is I built a grid and started saying, okay, there are really 4 features that you must really think about when you think about someone's uniqueness. You have to think about, number 1, is it truly unique? Like, a great example is face is unique, but not really, actually, right? You can have twins that look exactly the same and isn't truly unique. Similar to DNA, DNA is really the ultimate uniqueness, but actually with twins, they could be the same. But retina is definitely unique. Every single person has a different retina. So you have uniqueness itself, and there's something else I call resistance, or collection resistance. So for example, getting your retina is really hard to do. Like, at least with today's technology, you gotta stick your face into some things. Like, it's close, it's personal, it's hard to obtain. However, your face is not hard to obtain. I could take a photo of you in the crowd and I can instantly do Face ID on you. Very easy to collect. There's no resistance there to do so. And then there's reliability. I talked about that with my voice and my typing examples. Just because I can get it, and it does have uniqueness, how reliable is it? So for example, in your retina, is your retina the same when you're born as it is when you're 60 years old? It's a great question to be able to know how reliable a uniqueness stays through your life. And then finally, number 4, is it non-replicable? So for example, people think, well, DNA is clearly the most non-replicable. And it all really, actually, maybe, but I can pull your DNA off of a hair that you leave. So if I can get that DNA and then use that, then I can, quote unquote, replicate your DNA. Take fingerprints. Fingerprints are definitely unique, but if I can lift it off of a piece of glass and then use it, it's very replicable. So now these factors you have to start considering and start weighing and saying what truly is the right way to determine someone's uniqueness. And so out of this, you can see sort of the way I've graded and weighted them. And you can see that the very top Retina, by the way, wins by a landslide. It is very unique. It is hard to collect in terms of resistance. It's reliable and very non-replicable. But that is not easy. And because of these factors, you can't use it on a massive global basis. So you start looking in the middle. How do we do it today? Face ID is the standard way of doing it today. And then you can see why. Well, because if you look at face, it's right in the middle. Face is pretty unique. It's actually hard to replicate. It's not 100% hard, but it's 80-20. You get 80-20 out of this. The collection resistance is super easy. So if you're walking down a street, I can do Face ID. If you're looking at your phone, I do Face ID. I can take a photo, I can do Face ID. It's easy to collect, easy to verify and validate without a lot of technology. It's somewhat pretty reliable. I mean, besides wearing a bunch of glasses and doing prosthetics, like generally speaking, as long as your face is there, it's pretty reliable to get. And it's, again, 80-20 replicable. Someone will have to really go out of their way to replicate your face and to do it well enough to be able to bypass face detection. So it's right in the middle. It's not bad, it's not great, but it's easy. There's things that you can start seeing that are easy. And you look at fingerprint, face, they're right in that middle area, so you can start seeing easy to do on a laptop, easy to do on a phone, easy to do walking through through whatever gate or whatever things happen to be. Doors, these are easy to identify. So you can start seeing why these things are chosen as identity systems. Okay, so once you've picked something, and by the way, one of the things I started noticing in this is, well, wait a minute, proof of person is sort of unique, but you need to prove a person when they're dead just as much as when they're alive. So things like gait, typing, and voice should be eradicated because John Doe over here who is dead still needs to be identified. And so what is the uniqueness that I need to choose? So it eliminates anything that requires you to be alive in order to have proof of person. So now I know, okay, it needs to be fingerprint, DNA, or retina in order to make these things because they can be done in a way when the person is dead. So what's interesting is you can just stop here. You could pick retina and say retina is your identity. If I were able to get your retina, that's your identity, and we're done. Because that is truly proof of person. But then you say, well, wait a minute, that's not it. Because actually, identity was not the purpose of this talk. When you look at what we're talking about earlier, that's authentication. And authentication is a process. Identity, or that proof of person, is only one part of an authentication process. And actually, you need to be alive in order to authenticate. So therefore, you must have proof of life. So not only do you need proof of person and who they are and their uniqueness, but you now need to prove, are they alive? This is why, like, for example, many of you have done open accounts and you have to move your head when you show your ID. And I want to see proof of life. I want to see it's not some static photo. I want to see you move. I want to see YubiKeys. When you touch a YubiKey, that's only proof of life. That's only somebody closing a contact on that YubiKey in order to validate somebody is there. That's proof of life. And when you look at things of how people are trying to do proof of life, heats, heartbeat, movements, touches, this is proof of life and how it works. And so a great example of proof of life, I might add, is how many people have seen the movie Minority Report? Okay, in Minority Report, there are two major cybersecurity issues in this movie. The first one that I'll talk about is, do you remember when he had to go get his eyeballs removed and replaced with someone else's eyes because they were using retina for IDs, but he kept his eyes, and then he went back to his headquarters, and then he used the eyeball to unlock the door to get himself in. A great example of, hey, great, this is let me get rid of it. That's a great example of, hey, I have proof of person. I have an eyeball that is truly unique, but there is no proof of life. So it immediately recognized it, scanned it, opened the doors. Gosh, man, what is going on with all this? It immediately scanned and opened the doors, and he walks in. So this is an example of proof of life that's required, but it looked at proof of uniqueness, but not proof of life. And by the way, just for sort of extra credit, does anyone know what the second biggest cybersecurity issue in that movie was? Any question? Any ideas? Onboarding and offboarding. Like, that guy was eradicated as a traitor, and he was on the run, and someone forgot to clearly lock out his account. Because even if they had it, he should not have been authorized in order to do that. But anyone who's in IT and security was like, oh yeah, that's probably real. It makes the movie actually more real than it does anything else. Okay, so now you have to have proof of life. And then on the stack of that is now identity. Identity, as we know it, is actually only a human-readable label assigned to your uniqueness, right? Like, my name is not truly my uniqueness, it's just a label attached to me. I can change my name, as we have seen. I can get different passports. I can get different IDs from different countries, all with different names if I so choose. These are labels. These are not your actual identity. And so these are things at which today we think of as our identity, but truly is not, because anyone can hold a label. And finally, proof of knowledge. Now, I have something a little bit controversial on this. In a world at which you have true proof of person, proof of life, and the label associated with you, is proof of knowledge really required to prove identity? It is not. I actually believe proof of knowledge, when you think of proof of knowledge, what is proof of knowledge? Passwords, right? PIN codes. Things in your head that today are a sign of identity, I actually don't believe are a sign of identity. I actually would sort of propose that they are a sign of intent. Let me give you examples. Inside of intent, there are lots of cases where there is crimes that are going on that are very popular right now, where people look for people going into bars who are single. Guys, for example, are very good. Girls are an example for this. And they will roofie their drinks, and the people will get drunk. They'll walk them out to a car. A couple of guys will walk them out to a car. Hey, let me get you a car for you. You know, put them in a car, drive them off somewhere, take their phone, open their eyes, Face ID, open their phone, go into their mobile finance apps, Face ID transfers, and start transferring cash out. In order to steal, get the passwords, use Face ID to grab all their identity stuff, and then take their phone and then leave them and run off. A great example of where identity was true, but intent was not, right? And so this is an area of also like duress. If you're under duress, how do you know? In order to authenticate, you should not be under duress. You should have the intent that I want to authenticate. How do you prove that? This is a major gap in the way we think about things. And so my proposal is actually proof of knowledge, the password, can be about intent. So for example, if I want to do this, then I will let my password, my proof of knowledge out. Another good example of this is, any of you have kids, you always share, or you should be doing this if you do have kids, have a secret password with your kids, right? When you know if a stranger has to go pick them up, you need to pass a password to show, hey, you are acting on behalf of me. It's not an identity problem. It's clearly not me, but it is an intent that this person is supposed to pick you up, and they share the password, and it's okay to go with them. So there is a proof of intent or a proof of knowledge that I propose as part of this stack. So this is the full stack that as I was going through sort of creates what I would say is an identity. Of course, the most important part of this is you must have strong ties between these layers. This is where all of the fraud gets created. What do I mean by that? Let me give you an example. Let's take a birth certificate. Birth certificates today, I can take your birth certificate and walk over and then hand it to somebody, and then they immediately think that's me. There's no strong bond between me as a person, my proof of person, and my identity. that's being used. Nothing ties these together. There's a great talk that I'd like to point out that was done at DEF CON in, I think it was 2015, by this guy, Chris Rock. Not the actor Chris Rock, but his name actually is Chris Rock. And his title of his talk was, "I Will Kill You." And the subject matter of his talk was about the birth certificate and about Social Security and how you can create real identities. And he went and created what he calls shelf babies. And what are shelf babies? Well, what he does is he's found out, hey, by the way, how do you get a birth certificate? Well, either a doctor says, I've witnessed a birth, goes and signs, goes online and submits this registration, or you can register yourself as a midwife. So you can go online, register as a midwife, get a certificate as a midwife, say that someone was born, go online, fill out the form, sign your certificate as a midwife, put a fake physician's or a real physician's profile name in there without their authorization, submit it, they will then send you a birth certificate. You have a real birth certificate of a real fake person that gets created. And he's like, actually, you could do 50 of these. So if you do 50 of them, you wait 18 years, you now have 50 real certified identities with real Social Security numbers, real birth certificates. You can open accounts. You can kill them, by the way, and that was the other thing he said, is you can also register yourself as a funeral home, submit this stuff online, and actually claim these people are dead. You can kill your worst enemy, fake. And by the way, he warned, it's really hard to reverse. Like once you are dead in the legal system and in the system itself, like getting yourself out of that, he's like, is a nightmare. And so you can now take 50 people that are real identities, kill them, collect insurance, do whatever you want in order to do this, all because there's no strong bond between the identity label and the person and proof of person that you have, right? There's no bond there. Or proof of life, as we've seen. What's the bond of proof of life to proof of person to identity? All of these are bonds that need to be strongly tied, because if they're not, those are the gaps at which attackers make use of. So all of this, you think, wow, this is complicated. There's no way there's a system that could ever be able to do all of these things. Again, I did show you that there are people who are making great strides to do it in other countries and are getting close. They're not quite to this level yet, but they're getting pretty close. But interesting enough, while I was doing this presentation, I got an Apple Vision Pro. And it was interesting because in an Apple Vision Pro, oh, by the way, it needs to be continuous, I noticed something. I installed an Apple Vision Pro. I started using this thing. It has something called Optic ID. So instead of Face ID, it uses your eyes to authenticate you, and it takes a fingerprint on it. And actually, in Optic ID, it's very low friction. You put it on. It recognizes your eyes. It could do this continuously without you even knowing. So you could be playing a game, watching a movie, and it could continuously authenticate you without you even knowing that it's happening. It's used as proof of life because it can tell your eyes are alive and that you're moving around, which is what it does. And you could, third, this is both theoretical, but maybe show proof of intent. For example, if I could look at your eyes that way, could I determine whether you're distressed or not? Yeah, probably you can. And so there's an interesting angle of when you look at these virtual reality glasses, you could actually do all of this in one stack in a seamless user experience without anybody even knowing. And that's a pretty interesting concept to think about as we move into the future and how things like this could be brought into play. Now, of course, this is a security conference, so everyone is saying, well, hey, this is a privacy nightmare. Everyone thinks mark of the beast, tracking, like I don't want the government knowing what I'm doing. This is what everyone goes through. And to that, I debate you. In fact, I think it's the opposite of that. If you do this correctly, and other systems in other countries have shown this, not only will that not be the problem, it's the opposite. You'll have more privacy, more control of your information than you do today. Today, when I go to a doctor's office, I stand at a window and a receptionist asks for my birth date and I have to say it in front of a room full of people. I copy my identity information 50,000 different times on 50,000 different papers, and it's on the internet, and all of yours are on the internet 50,000 different places. Versus, wouldn't it be better that I could go prove my age by you just saying, hey, government system, is Caleb older than 21? Yes, he is. Great. Okay, you're allowed to rent a car. That's it. They don't need to know my birth date. They don't need to know exactly how old I am. All they need to know is that a certified authority said, is this person 21 or not? They are. Done. I could go over here. It says, is this person Caleb? Yes, this person's Caleb. Certified authority says, that's it. I don't need to know anything else. I don't need to know where you live. I don't need to know your mother's maiden name. I don't need to know your family history. I don't need your fingerprint. All I need is this Caleb? Yes, it is. Great, I have more control over my privacy and what I own and where I am than anything else. Now it's not everywhere, it's only in the right places, and only the people who need it get it. And I think that empowers people in order to do this thing the right way. And so where do we go from here? So in this presentation, you'll notice that I'm not giving solutions or how this thing should be done. I'm just thinking through it from a principles perspective. But I believe that where we need to go and where we are going to go is we have to strongly tie proof of person and proof of identity at birth. This needs to occur at birth and needs to grow all the way to the rest of their life. You need to tie it strongly as a bond at birth. You need to build strong bonds between those layers. For example, even if we took a birth certificate and imprinted a QR code of a signed hash of our unique identity onto that birth certificate, I can now know when I go to get a birth certificate, I have to prove that proof of person before I get a copy of that birth certificate. I can't just go ask for it. I need to prove that I, through my DNA or proof of person or whatever happens to be, is the same person on that birth certificate that was signed. There should be chain of custody from origin of proof of person all the way to proof authenticity. So I'm going to give you a very extreme example of this, but if I were on a laptop and I logged in, that identity using my proof of person, my identity went from me all the way to the packets that went across the wire. Every packet that I sent was proven signed by me as my identity. Carry this company, by the way, it's not just people that need this. Companies have their own identity. Systems have their own identity. And so how do you also apply this so that companies themselves now have an ID at its core base and systems have an ID at their core base? And then my prediction, this is going to be super, a little bit, I'm going to get a lot of arguments on this one. But I believe that if you did this properly, if this were actually able to be done, where I can log in with my identity and every packet that I sent has proven authenticity to me, you would create a world of a bad internet and a good internet, a clean internet. For example, why are our financial systems, our health systems, our retail systems, our government systems on an internet that is full of anonymous problems? Why are CISOs needed? Because we have to protect from all these bad people because there is no attribution, no accountability. People can hack. The internet from us, we are basically placing ourselves in the middle of the ghetto and trying to defend ourselves. Versus if there were a clean internet, which from the beginning I could not even get on that network. Think about this as a VPN, that the only way you could get on that VPN was through true identity and accountability of what I did. And every packet and every request I sent had my identity proven and signed from me all the way to the system. Then the attacks would drop and plummet to zero. Because at that point, every person on that network has accountability. Every person is proven an individual. I know who you are, you don't have to log in. I can display your page, I can allow you to transfer funds, I can allow you to purchase things with never ever entering ID. That is where you should go do the important stuff. The dirty internet can go do wherever you want your anonymous activity or whatever else needs to be done. But I don't need to have the level of security teams I need as a financial system if I'm on a network at which truly authenticates you in order to get on it. And that, I think, if you can get there, this is where this thing can go. All right, So just as a wrap up, while identity is not my core expertise, this presentation, I hope, offers you a perspective on some of the challenge and rethinking it in the way that I thought about it from a first principles basis, to think about it as an outsider and think about identity in a little bit of a different light. And I hope all this does is spurn thoughts and discussions. Obviously, everything I say here is not from expert advice, but from thoughts and thinking that I have been doing personally as someone who has gone through this process. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I think maybe I have time for one question or two questions. I'm happy to answer any if you've got any. Otherwise, I'll hang out outside. Oh, go right ahead.
Hey, great talk. Thought-provoking. Your biometric-based identity approach relies on centralized systems, risking privacy breaches and potentially exclusion by authorities. Self-sovereign identity, SSI, where individuals control decentralized identifiers and credentials via blockchain, is considered the #1 approach because it ensures user anonymity, resists censorship, and leverages cryptography for security. Have you explored SSI as a more resilient and inclusive alternative?
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, as you saw in my presentation, I am not offering what the solutions are, right? Are you using blockchain? Are you using keys? Are you using, those are not things that I offer. Actually, Singapore is not, and Estonia is not. So they offer both blockchain, and their X-Road framework are decentralized aspects of doing it. So it's a great example of countries that have both found ways of doing it decentralized, but also have centralized capability for answers. And again, I am not an identity creation expert, but what I'm just saying is, hey, these are the layers that need to be there to help prove. How you manage, deploy, or create those layers is up to whoever decides to do that. I am not the expert in that aspect. But Estonia is a great example of them doing it without centralization.
To be fair, you focused on physical and centralized.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yes, sir.
One of the issues with identity, I mean, right down to the fact that, like, we use names that are given to us by our parents, is every identity, so on and so forth, is sort of just an assertion, a declaration. We can really tie, I guess, our physical state to our DNA and our retina, but everything after that, is sort of fungible in a way. And that's kind of part of the problem with the internet and with our own identity states. Everything's going to be based on shifting sands, except perhaps for the DNA and the retina. I don't know what the solution is, but that's a problem I don't think we can quite get over. I mean, people change their names all the time, people move. People have an ability to change their identity because it's ultimately just an assertion, a declaration, rather than really who we are.
Well, let me give you, I think that's a great example of why strongly tying those layers together as bonds is important. For example, if you change your name, what associates your name with your unique proof of person? Right. And how is that strongly associated? Mm-hmm. So I may be able to change my name, but is there a backward way of tracing back that chain of custody to my proof of person? Yeah. And if so, then you can change your name to whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me. In fact, my identification does not rely on your name. My identification relies on the fact that that chain of custody goes back to a true proof of person. Yeah. And at that point, as long as you strongly tie those bonds, those layers together, this is what helps. Yeah. And again, to your point, the system today doesn't. Right. So you can go create wherever you want, and there's no trace back. Yeah. Right? And whether that's done over blockchain, decentralized, or whether that's done through a centralized government, I don't know. But I know that the methodology should follow.
Yeah, right. It's inconsistent throughout, up and down.
Correct.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
Have you thought at all about sort of social factors that can prove identity? So I looked you up on LinkedIn while you were talking, and you and I have, 20 connections in common. So if I wanted to, assure myself that it was you, I might call a friend and say, is this the real Caleb? So have you thought about that? Because your stack is all sort of, physical characteristics or or the throw-off of physical characteristics. But if I called your best friend and said, "Is this the guy?" he would say yes.
In the world of AI, I don't believe that's true anymore, right? Because what does my best friend use in order to identify it's me? He uses the image, the video, a voice, mannerisms, maybe.
If he's known you for years, if he's your neighbor, if you go to the same club, if you...
Well, I mean, but then there's a physical presence, and
True.
by the way, like for example, people do this all the time. Is I could adapt someone's identity, live next to you, and my name and that identity I stole from someone else, and you would never know. Is that my true identity? It is not. And so the government, like,
It could be a factor, though.
and the other good example is my LinkedIn. Who knows that that LinkedIn is truly my LinkedIn
Don't know.
and owned by me?
Well, you're claiming it.
I know, but that's the example. It's like, if you go back to the origin, the core is what makes you unique. There is a thing, there's a DNA in you that I need to prove. So it doesn't matter your name, your mannerisms. You could change your mannerisms, you could get surgeries, you could change your looks. So your best friend from 30 years ago can look at you and say, I don't know if that's who you are, but I can go and get your DNA and I can say, at birth, I can absolutely prove that's who you are. Right, and so there's those factors you kind of have to sort of consider.
I think the future is going to be a combination of what you're talking about and some social factors as well.
More than likely,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. If you have any other questions, I'll take them up.